You've seen the viral clips, the newsletters, the growth, but behind Codie Sanchez's content empire is a guy you've never heard of until today.
And that's when Codie Sanchez kind of came into my world. She was like, why don't you just come over and join my team? And that really was a huge shift in my career and, in my trajectory.
Meet Tanner Walters, the media strategist and operator that built the machine.
Started making videos around like 16, just picked up a little camera that was sitting around the house and got into Final Cut.
He took her brand from 3 to nearly 9 million followers and generated over 100 million video views in a single year.
It was a lot of numbers. I was like, wow, looking at YouTube Studio, this is crazy. And honestly, the most interesting thing, it's like learning the topic that she's talking about.
Building a scalable, performance-driven content system that transformed Codie into one of the biggest names in the online space.
It was basically just great project management on some level, making sure that we had our timeline set. We knew what content was going out in advance. We had 4 weeks of newsletter ideas ready to go.
Join us in today's episode as we break down the systems, team structure, and strategy that created and transformed a solid social media profile into an 8-figure media machine.
Develop the offer and see if people either one, click on it or take you up on it. I don't think it has to be that complex.
If you're a founder, creator, or CMO building media in-house, this is the playbook you'll want to follow.
That experience for me working with all those different people was like, I was able to kind of be the most like creative on a skill set basis that I ever have.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel.
Tanner, we are live. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Jordan. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk all things content strategy, media, all the good stuff.
Okay, and I just want to address the elephant in the room. This is a remote podcast, but I think this is the most professional remote podcast that we have done. So thank you for taking
Yeah, I mean, I don't do these really that often. I'm not on the internet that often. So I was like, let's make it big. Let's go big. Let's, do it professional. Really, really hold that image. Because, I think that's one thing. I mean, we could dive into it, but your image really matters, and how you portray yourself is super important. So yeah, I wanted to, make sure I'm doing that well.
I appreciate it, and I think your first impressions are very solid. But look, I just want to dive straight in at the deep end. What got you into the kind of content and media strategy world?
Really, it's because I came from the action sports world. I used to race motocross, and it's so simple, but I just wanted to make videos of my friends and, me as well. And so I started making videos at a young age. Probably I started racing motocross when I was 13. I got into it really late and then started making videos around like 16. Just picked up a little camera that was sitting around the house and got into Final Cut. Did all of the cheesy effects on Final Cut, I ended up posting those videos on YouTube, and one of them got like 4,000 views, and I thought it was so big at the time. And I actually have taken all those videos down since then. I just don't want people seeing them. But so started making videos, and then really I went into like an exercise science route. I, have my degree in kinesiology. So really went into like bodybuilding and stuff like that. And I wanted to be like this guy named Steve Cook. Steve Cook was a big YouTuber back in the day, bodybuilding.com, all that good stuff. So started vlogging and was not good at that either. And then this one time I came across a video on YouTube that was of the GoPro Omni, and I'm really getting deep into the weeds here, but this GoPro Omni was the first 360 camera at the time. It was like 6 GoPros on like a rig basically. And I saw the video and I was like, wow, this is going to be the future of media. Young 18-year-old, 19-year-old. And so I ended up buying one. It was like $5,000. And I was like, I'm going to basically use this to go, sell it to real estate agents, do tours of all these facilities. And long story short, didn't end up doing any of that. It was very hard to use, just got in over my head. So but around that time, I'm originally from Indiana, moved to Austin, Texas after I graduated college. I just wanted to be around cool people doing cool things. The second week I was here, I actually met Lance Armstrong at On It Gym. And, I'm a Live Strong kid. So it was a big moment for me, and it was just such a casual conversation, and I knew that he was trying to get into video stuff. So I basically just asked him like, "Hey, are you do you need help with video?" And I was actually talking with Caleb Ralston about this, and I charged him like $250 or something like that to do a video. And it was with Jimmy Johnson at the time, who again, from where I'm from, is like, I kind of grew up in a NASCAR family. And he was a big deal, so I'm literally meeting all of my like idols essentially, like, and I just moved to Austin, which was a big step in my career. Started to do freelance stuff for the last, for 4 years from there. And then went into a social media app. I'm really telling my story awful here. Went into a social media app, startup called Ibble, and got into UX, UI design. We raised like $10 million while I was there, and it was 2020. So it was a really exciting time for VCs. And saw the writing on the wall there, really didn't have the success that it needed to. And ultimately got into an agency with my friend Alex Garcia. We were really focused on, basically how do we tell uh, how do we create brand documentaries essentially? How do we create episodic brand documentaries that are long form content that is really going to dive deep into the stories of these brands and the things that they have going on, the activations, and how do we repurpose all of that content across the board? We did that for about a year. We worked with Collective here in Austin. We worked with Kane Footwear, who, they're kind of blowing up right now. C4, like some big companies, and that's when Codie Sanchez kind of came into my world, and the reason that I'm on this podcast, because she was looking for some short form content help, and basically what had happened is, there was some things going on with the agency at that time. It's called Rare Air. And she was like, why don't you just come over and join my team? And that really was, I didn't know it at the time, but that was like a huge shift in my career and, in my trajectory. And really, since then has opened up a lot of different doors for me, and, really opened my world up to not like filmmaking in general and like making videos, but like, how does the internet work? How does virality work? All of that good stuff.
I've got two kind of follow-up questions on this, and the first one is maybe slightly unrelated, but it's about location. How important was the move from you away from kind of where you grew up to Austin?
It was huge. I mean, it was everything, honestly. I mean, because you can't really you can't really do anything in the middle of nowhere with people that aren't trying to do anything, or at least on a big scale, and like really trying to change the world. So it was by far moving was by far the biggest thing that impacted my life. I mean, in Austin, I just got really lucky with it. The only reason that I moved here was because I had this idea of like on a gym in my mind. And, like, at the time, Aubrey Marcus, Joe Rogan, all that stuff. I was like, these people seem awesome. I'm into fitness. Like, I want to be around those types of people. And yeah, I would say that, to get what you want, you have to go to the places where those people are, and try to provide them some sort of value. So it was huge.
And did both the Lance Armstrong connection, like Codie Sanchez as well, did that come from in-person kind of meeting?
Yeah, it did. I mean, with Lance, I was literally in the restroom, uh, changing, getting ready for a workout, and he's going to the restroom, and I just asked him a simple question like, "Did you ride in today?" That's how I started the conversation, and then from there, it kind of uh, evolved, and I got a text message the day after that was like, "Hey, this is Lance Armstrong," and again, this is a huge moment. Like this is Lance Armstrong texting me right now. That's crazy. And like I said, ended up doing some work with him, and that one was interesting because you know, I basically went to his office and I feel like I got like interrogated. I got like bad cop and nice cop, and they were like trying to suss out like if I'm, a good person or not, or if I'm like what are my intentions behind being around here before I even got to do any work with him. So that was interesting. But and then with Cody, it was really just right place, right time. Like, yeah, being in those circles, being around the connections and the things that are going on that just kind of helped me land that. I mean, having knowing people as well is pretty important, So without Alex, because Alex was kind of like the face of everything we were doing, and he was driving in a lot of attention for us. Because at the time he had like 170,000 followers on Twitter. And so it was it was a way to, get new clients. And that's kind of how we landed Codie. But I think the other thing really is just being like completely like authentic and truthful in who you are in those moments, not trying to like kowtow to who they are and, try to be something that you think they want. Just be who you are, and hopefully that works out for you. Hopefully you're a good person.
Try not to fanboy too much as well as probably.
Exactly. That's a huge piece. And I mean, really, it's just all these people. They're just people, if you just treat them like people and give them the respect that they deserve and they respect you as well, then I think that you can have a great relationship with them.
For sure. And with Cody, what is it that kind of attracted you to working with her initially?
Oh, the numbers. I mean, that's a simple one. The I had never worked with a creator or any brand at that point that had like done those numbers. It was all smaller type of stuff, startups, like just getting off the ground. And with her, I mean, at the time when I joined, she had 600,000 subs on YouTube, and across the board, she had 3 million followers. So, you know, it was a lot of numbers. I was like, wow, looking at YouTube Studio, 500,000 views. Like, this is crazy. That was honestly the most interesting thing. And then with her too, it's like learning the topic that she's talking about. It was just a great combo there for me.
And why do you think she has, like, in such a short period of time, been able to garner such crazy numbers?
Differentiation. She's different than a lot of other people and what they're talking about in a multitude of ways. And then really obsession. I mean, talk about obsessed. Like I learned a lot of what it takes to be at the best in the game, one of the best in the game. And it's constantly pushing, it's constantly learning, it's setting up the right systems, having the right processes, being consistent, all of that type of stuff. But again, I think she really hits home on like, core wants, core needs as well. That's something that is really like can be shared, and people want to learn that type of information because ultimately, like at the end of the day, especially like, around her messaging, it's about freedom, and freedom is kind of like a universal topic on some level. So you can pretty much talk to a lot of different people when you speak to things that are bigger. Freedom is the overarching theme, and then inside of that, it's personal finances, it's buying businesses, it's you know basically freeing. Her whole saying is freeing the bank account and freeing the mind. So those are big things that everybody kind of wants, in my opinion.
And how important is that kind of mission or vision to a creator? Is it critical?
I don't think so. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, you look at like, I mean, I'm pretty big fans of the Paul brothers. Honestly, I've been kind of keeping up with them for a while now, because I'm in the same age bracket as them. And I mean, what's their mission? It's to be the best entertainer in the world, but I don't think it's really that deep. It's just to provide people like kind of an escape. But yeah, I think that it kinda depends on what your niche is. There's a lot of different ways to slice the pie. If you're an educator or if you're like a commodity and like things which almost everything, could be commoditized, like, you need to have a bigger purpose, of course. Yeah, I think it's especially attracting talent. Like, this is something that, I was talking with my friend Jeremy Mary about. He has this company called Clickables. By the way, if you need thumbnails, go to Clickables. But he was telling me the story, where this agency owner basically, was kind of struggling in figuring out what his purpose was, how to motivate people. And he created this like saying that like, I just want to make YouTube a better place. And I think that that's a good purpose, having purpose, and it inspires people to come underneath you and work for you and drive towards that mission as well. So, because it feels like you're doing something bigger than just serving yourself. So it's not necessary, but it's helpful. It's helpful.
Okay. And can we talk, I guess, about the high level strategy now in terms of what you did with Cody? Can you break down the kind of major channels you worked across and how they were used strategically?
Yeah. Well, when I originally started out, my title and my role was head of production. So I would say that's everything start to finish on video. Whether it's short form or whether it's YouTube. I had pretty heavy hands in both of those, but we had a team, of course. At 3 million followers, you're probably going to have a team, hopefully. So I kind of stepped into a team, and the real problem with the team was that there wasn't great process and there wasn't like a centralized person to kind of move everything around. A good portion of the team was remote at the time when I joined. So we had a head of content that was remote. We had a YouTube strategist that was remote, a written content manager that was remote. Like everybody was remote. So, bringing in that in person like coordination amongst the team, I think was pretty important and frees Codie's time up. But really, yeah, like I said, it was in charge of everything from production. And so that would be making short form content, that would be making long form content, kind of how do we ideate on videos in general? Like what's the process around that? Because you need a process, especially when you have a team. So that was my first year there, and then the second year there, our head of content ended up leaving, and I kind of stepped in as the head of content slash creative director. And really from there, it was like, okay, what are our strategies across the board on each platform to grow the most followers? And that's where my focus and our focus was at as a team. Again, this is a team effort. I would not say I'm a mastermind pulling strings, making sure everybody works. I mean, it's kind of it was a special moment really because Cody is a prolific creator, has a great message. We had a good team around us, and I was just able to kind of step in and like hopefully I like to think like clean the process up, make sure that everybody was you know felt like they knew what their purpose was here instead of just, you know, kind of like making content, not really having great communication with, the CEO in this case or the creator. So, yeah, it was pretty broad, but mainly visuals is what I was focused on.
And what does that look like in terms of, producing stuff? Is there kind of one root content pillar that everything else is derived from? Or what does that creation process look like?
With YouTube in particular, so YouTube and the newsletter were the pillar pieces of content. So we had you know, some success on the YouTube channel. There was I wasn't a part of the start of that, but I know how it got started. And basically, shout out Jamie Rossthorn. He was a huge person in kind of creating the strategy around YouTube. And, at the time, I think it was a little more innovative than it is now, which is you go find outlier videos and kind of recreate, repackage those that are within your niche. I think that strategy's definitely been used a couple times now. But then, once you find one that hits and a format that hits, then you just keep trying to figure out how you can recreate that and build off of that momentum. So that was YouTube, but the newsletter was kind of the original place where Codie, like those were the original Codie thoughts. That was the first platform that she grew. It was a newsletter. And I think that she started back in 2020 when the pandemic hit. And, her whole thing was like, we need basically like an awakening. There needs to be somebody speaking contrarian thoughts into the world. So the newsletter was the place that she really started on. And also, X, LinkedIn, those different types of written platforms because it's just easier to produce written content for most people. So started with written, then launched a TikTok, and that was around the time that TikTok started to blow up. And obviously there was a focus on TikTok as well. Like what is the type of content that we're creating here? Blew up on TikTok. I think maybe got to like 800,000 followers, and then started to drive that traffic over to Instagram, YouTube, all of the different platforms from there. Um, but as far as how the process worked, yeah, it was really individualized, I would say, honestly, that we need over time, we did a better job of trying to coordinate what happened on YouTube with what happened on the newsletter, with what happened or what we're talking about on X and all the different platforms. But at first, when we got in there, it was like we kind of had these one-off random ideas, or we would just kind of repurpose some of the top performing content on YouTube in this case, because that was a pillar platform, and ran that playbook for a little while until we ran into the problem, which the problem was we didn't really know who we were speaking to. We didn't have a demographic or a avatar to speak to. So it was like we were making videos left and right that were really random. And that really hurt our growth, honestly. We would go from, 200,000 views on a video to 30,000 views, and we didn't know why. We're like, "What is happening here?" So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. It's pretty long-winded there, but that's kind of a little bit of the strategy that we focused on.
Yeah. No, it certainly answers the question. I guess the follow-up I have to that is how did you kind of iron out that strategy over time, and what did it evolve into that kind of stopped this scattergun approach?
Yeah, it was basically just great project management on some level, making sure that we had our timelines set. We knew what content was going out in advance. We had 4 weeks of newsletter ideas ready to go. We had great team meetings across the board. Every Friday with Cody, we would meet and have a content team meeting where you go through all of the different platforms and you talk about what worked this week, what didn't work this week, what you're going to do about it next week, and just analyze the platform or analyze the performance across the different platforms. So that meeting really did allow us as a content team to say, okay, here's what we're looking to push in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or we have this event coming up. Here's the type of content that we need to create to get ready for that event. So it really was a just great project management, great communication amongst the team, and really building out a great Notion system. For us, that was a huge piece of it. So,
So a lot of it is the kind of boring stuff in the background.
oh, I would say a lot of it is the boring stuff in the background. Just making sure that the content goes out and that it's getting done on time because you're working with vendors, you're working with, people that are remote, you're working with employees in person and trying to coordinate all of those different aspects in order to really produce great content is not necessarily that easy.
You brought team up a few times. Can we just talk to what that team structure looks like now?
Well, it's changed since I've left, so that's a big caveat, right? Like, we were in that 3 to, 8 million follower range. When I joined, there was a head of content, there was a head of production, we had a content ops manager who basically made sure that our Notion worked amazing. We had videographer/editor. We really were a small crew for, what we were doing on YouTube. We had a I'll call it like just a content strategist in general. His name's Christian Battle. I learned a lot from Christian, and he basically positioned our brand a little bit, positioned what we talked about, how we packaged ourselves, even came up with short form ideas, which is a huge aspect of the growth. And then we had a head of newsletter who wrote 2 newsletters a week. And he was also in the community as well because Cody had a contrarian community, all about business buying and stuff like that. So he was in there kind of repurposing content that was being created in there. Then we had a head of written social. Her name was Jasmine. Shout out Jasmine. And she was managing X, LinkedIn, and YouTube community posts and would have writers underneath her as well to, create threads and one-off tweets, whatever the agreement was at the time. And then from there, we had 2 content VAs. So one VA worked overnight, one worked during the day. One was more focused on, basically just inputting a bunch of numbers across the board and any one or any odds and ends ops stuff. And then the other was more focused on like community engagement, commenting, posting, making sure that things went out on time. And that was basically the team. And then I would say the one piece that really helped out, and this was around a year into my stint there. We hired, and this is like the kind of the new wave that's happening now. We hired a clipper, I'll call it. His name was Ryan Majen, and he's worked with some of the bigger creators in the educational space. And what they did is they kind of took over the TikTok. Our TikTok for like a year just didn't grow. We didn't have a strategy on it. We didn't know what we were doing on it. And what he came in and did was basically take all of Codie's existing content, mainly like talking head content, because it's just way easier to clip up than, to make a YouTube video work on short form. That's pretty hard to do. He came in and just clipped up a bunch of Codie's different content across the board, would post 3 times on TikTok, and we started to see massive growth from that. And the beauty of that was that we were able to repurpose the content that was on TikTok to the other platforms. We had a barrier. It was like 100,000 views. When it hit 100,000 views on TikTok, let's get it over to the other platforms. So, there's a mix of in-person team and a mix of contractors. And then, like I said, I guess the one other piece is we worked with clickables to create thumbnails as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You have mentioned a few times in terms of kind of remote in-person agencies and stuff. Can you just give your thoughts on that? And, for you, what does an ideal team look like? Is it, all in person? Is it all kind of, full-time hires, or what's the structure?
Really, I think that you have to have somebody that's your right-hand man in your content creation journey. I mean, some people will call that a creative director, some people will call that a head of content. I don't really care about the title of it, but they're basically the one that's looking out for you, being you're able to pass things off to them, delegate to them. They're managing the team. They're coming up with some strategy, ideally that person can like also help out in other ways. So they have an innate skill set, that you also need. Um, in my case, it's video, I can shoot video. I can do all of that stuff. I can edit. Some people, it might be a writer, whatever their preferred platform is. But I really do think that you need somebody that's kind of like your head of content. From there, I think it could be pretty diversified once you have that person, because they're able to ensure that, your best interest is taken care of, or your interest is, the first and the highest priority. So I think that it's nice. What's happening right now, in my opinion, is you're basically getting, and it's a big opportunity for people that are trying to get into the creator space, is you need to commit to somebody. So if you're like somebody that's wanting to work with creators, you need to commit to them. Stop thinking about the agency model. Go learn from the best that are doing it. Work with the best. Kind of get your name attached to their name in some level. I mean, I'm obviously going to be super biased here, um, but get your name attached to their name. See the processes. Hopefully you can contribute in a meaningful way, and then maybe go think about doing some agency stuff. But basically, what I'm trying to get at is I think that if you build out your core team, they're going to need to be people that they may not be the expert in this field. They have a lot of interest in it, but they want to be the expert. And you can help them facilitate becoming the expert as a creator in this case. So that's a long-winded way to say that I think that you basically need to find people that may not have exactly what you want, but want to get there. And then you go find the best, consultants, the best contractors to come in and help facilitate that work and exchange learnings. Ultimately, you're basically paying to learn what they know. And then your team over time just becomes, you know, even stronger. So that would be my approach to it, is kind of build out get your right hand person, find them. Hopefully they have a skill set that really contributes to actually getting work done. They're not just like a manager. And then build out your internal team with young, hungry people, and then go hire the experts to teach those young, hungry people and
Okay,
implement.
that's
Yeah.
super helpful. Um,
Mhm.
Over time, so I think you kind of start there with the right hand person. Over time, I guess you then kind of focus on a few platforms of choice. But how do you build out the rest of the team as you go?
I mean, I think that you have to win on one platform first before you go diversify for sure. Again, like with Cody's route, it was newsletter, it was written content, then it diversified into video. So this is super nuanced, and there's a lot of thoughts around where you should start, but really whatever you're most comfortable with and whatever you're most uniquely positioned to do, in my opinion. So with some people that might be written content on X, they might be in the news every day, and they might have new takes that people want to hear. So focus on that. And then once you really figure out your audience and you have, content market fit or product market fit, however you want to see it, you need to monetize it somehow, so because otherwise you're not gonna be able to grow a media team. So if it's a community, if it's a course, if it's a subscription, a monthly subscription, whatever it is, you need to monetize first and prove out that there's a model here that if you scale it and hire more people that you can continue to run a business. And then yeah, once you do that, I think you start to, and this is, I'm trying to coin this term, so like, nobody take it. You try to become omnipresent basically. Like you are everywhere. You try to get in as many faces as possible across as many different platforms as possible is kind of how I see it. And again, that's like depending on how aggressive you're wanting to go with it. Like that's a little dependent on that. That would be my approach.
I want to touch on the monetization angle. So when you were working with Codie, can you just talk to what the channels were that you guys were using to monetize the business?
Well, with her, it was education and community. So, obviously YouTube makes ad revenue and, we had sponsorships. So, that channel, I mean, I think it makes somewhere between 300 to, 400,000 just off of ad revenue. And then you have all the additional sponsorships, which those vary. But really what you try to get people to do is, just be aware of you on all these different social channels and then get them to either attend a webinar, download a lead magnet, whatever it is. And eventually, either buy your course, join your community. That's like typical like creator type of playbooks here. And yeah, that's where you really start to, make money that supports the machine, basically.
Okay, so it's kind of sponsorships, course, community, book, I believe as well, right?
Book is a one that's like a wild card for sure. Yeah, that's definitely, and it's interesting right now. I'm helping out a company called selfpublishing.com, and what they do is basically help, thought leaders and people publish books. And book is definitely an interesting way to monetize. I mean, you have to have a pretty big audience, to really make it hit home, I think. But I think it's really like that is basically the ultimate sales piece of content is a book. I mean, somebody's spending so much time with you and your words written on a page and they're repeating your words in your head. Uh, and obviously you're getting them value, but some people after they read a book, they're like, okay, now I want to, join the community or now I want to learn more about this. So I think a book is really like just the ultimate sales tool on some level, but it has to provide a lot of value and you almost are, giving away your entire playbook and, somebody could go do it for themselves if they wanted to. But yeah, I mean, the book, I wasn't super privy to all of the numbers, but I definitely think it's a good way to build authority, not
For sure.
necessarily monetize.
Okay. What would you say
Mhm.
to a creator that's just kind of starting to think about monetizing? What platforms or channels should they start with?
That's really hard for me to answer if I'm being honest with you. I mean, it's so unique to the different creator and what they're looking to do. But ultimately, it's just being really unique, and providing something that's not already out there, I think. Like, if it's already out there, then and there's a lot of things out there, that just how can you position yourself differently to make people interested in what you have to offer, Like for me, for example, there's a lot of different, like YouTube strategists, content strategists, people out there. And, their offerings are group calls or, production services, strategy, all of that stuff. Well, I'm kind of trying to position myself as like that right hand person to these bigger creators, like actually coming in and helping them grow out their media team. And I don't see that many people doing that. There could be out there, but yeah, it's just really trying to position yourself a little differently and give an offer that is interesting and test it, really throw it out there, see if people are interested in it and start to figure out if it's scalable from there and how you can repeat it. That's ultimately what it comes down to is, can you repeat it and can you give the client success in this case?
And are there any financials or numbers that you can share around the kind of monetizations, the success that you had with Codie?
This should be the intro of the video. We should be like, when I was working with Codie, we made, no,
Yeah,
I mean, I probably shouldn't say all the numbers, but let's just say it's 8 figures basically. Like it's an 8-figure business, 8-figure creator business. And ultimately, like the play there was to go invest in other companies, so attract the highest talent out in the, entrepreneurship field and give them money so that you can invest and, make money from that as well. So it's not really even just about like the monetization of the media. It's really about the opportunities that it opens up alongside it.
for sure. I know another big number that came up when we were talking before is 100 million in
Yeah.
2024. So that was total views. Can you just talk
That
to the kind of reasons behind that success?
yeah, that was total views across long form and short form. And the interesting thing is it got brought up on our content call on a Friday, and it was just like this random little tidbit that got added in there, and we were like, "Oh, like we hit 100 million views on YouTube in this year." And what's the Kobe Bryant saying? Like, there's still more work to do. That's kind of just the mentality. But really, I think that we just got clear on who our avatars were across the board, for long form content, for short form content across platforms. In this case specifically, the 100 million views was on YouTube. So we and this is a lot in part to do with Christian. I mean, he is kind of the mastermind behind that. He identified that our short form content basically was speaking to a younger beginner type of person that wanted a side hustle, wanted to figure out, oh, this person makes this much money doing that, or this famous company did this, or whatever, that positioning was. But we had a beginner avatar there, and then on the long form content, we had job working John, and job working Jane. And those were people that, were in their 9 to 5, wanted to leave it, wanted to, break the chains of their work and their life and become free. And so we just started to position our content for those types of people, really. And then the main thing is like, and this wasn't the best strategy, and I don't think is what you do long term, honestly, because it gets kind of watered down eventually. But we would repurpose our best performing content across the board. So, for example, like these listicles that always work so well for us on YouTube long form, like we would be like, 7, and we always use the number 7. I don't know why. It was kind of creepy ultimately, but we use the number 7, 7 businesses that you can start in a weekend, or 7 businesses you can start for less than $1,000. Like we would kind of just repurpose and repackage that format, and because it worked well, and it kind of is what blew the channel up originally. Then for short form, we would do things that basically we would use the same exact content and film it in different ways, talk about it in different ways, show it in different ways. So we would tell a story of Mattress Mac was one of the guys, and that blew up. It got 5 million views or whatever it did. Well, then we go back and we look, okay, how can we do that same exact video, just film it in a different way and edit it in a different way that is probably going to get us the same amount of views and, the same amount of subscribers. So we would do things like that. But like I said, ultimately what it came down to was knowing who we were speaking to and knowing where they were at on that specific platform.
Is it typical to have multiple different avatars and to almost kind of nurture people through different stages of the journey on different platforms?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I know that, I mean, that's an advanced concept though on some level, but at least even when you start creating, like you should know what the pain points are, what the needs are of that person, what the wants are of that person, because you're ultimately speaking to somebody. I think that's the thing that's easy to, especially when you start doing like, really large numbers, you kind of forget that there's actually people behind there watching, and like they want something, they're looking for something, they're escaping something, whatever it is. So yeah, that's where I would start, especially in the beginning, is identifying that. But I know that like Dan Martell, for example, has like 5 different avatars that he speaks to. And what they do when they script things is they'll put that avatar in the script to remind them that like this is who you're talking to. And it kind of reminds me similar to like I've I'm reading this book. It's called The Everything Store with Jeff. It's about Amazon and Jeff Bezos, and in their meetings, he would have a chair, an empty chair in the meetings to identify or, basically put the customer in that chair. And so that they were in the room and they were always thinking about the customer. And I think that that's what some people forget when they create content is they do it for themselves and they like want to talk about what they're doing and what they're all about, but to me, that's not. I mean, some people it works really well for, and when you can do that, I think that you have a really true, audience and a true fan base. But really, I think the question always has to come back to why do they care, and what value are you providing for them? Those are the questions that, at least in my world, coming from like an educational perspective, is really interesting, and you have to do that.
Okay. I want to switch lanes now slightly, and I know what you do today and what you're going to be focusing on is scaling creators up, helping them build out teams and such. But people have to start somewhere. What advice would you have for founders that are looking to start creating?
Don't do it. No. Uh, I'm guilty of that. So no, I think you have to talk about the things that you're doing, especially in today's age. It's like, I mean, everybody creates content. So just starting to talk about the things that you're doing and putting it out into the world, I think is really the first place to start. But when you do that, it's like trying to think about how you're what are other people getting out of it? What are they getting into? What are they feeling when they watch your content? So I would say that talk about the things that you do because that's an easy place to start. Talk about the things that you want to do, and then talk about the difference between those two things. Like, okay, here's what I want to do, and I'm gonna go now try to do it, and then this is what I learned in that period. That's probably an easy place to start. And again, pick the different platform that you think is best for you. We all have our favorite platforms. My favorite is YouTube. I think that it's just long term way more valuable than anything else out there. And you can really it's a hard game to play, but you can really just be yourself. But again, that doesn't mean that you can't post in other places. It's just kind of, I think, pick the one that you're going to bet on at first, and then package it. And on YouTube, it's specifically packaging. Like, how are you positioning this? And yeah, try to see what people react to. What do they click on? How long do they watch for? Like, look at all of your metrics. Don't just post and forget about it. Like, post, analyze, come up with a content scorecard. That's a real key right there. Look at it every week, analyze, most teams are, at the highest level, the creators are looking at this every day, like what are their stats? Where are they moving towards? What worked yesterday? If you're just starting out, I would do it on like a weekly basis, just an hour review of what worked last week. And then try something different this week. Take the learnings from that week, try something different this week, see what progresses. And ultimately, like, I think being in it for the long term is kind of really where it's at. You know, not trying to do it because other people are doing it, but doing it because it feels like real to you and that you think that this is something that's worth going out into the world. Those are, my pieces of advice. But again, I mean, I'm struggling. Like, I don't do that, I do it for other people. But that's why we're here on a podcast, kind of trying to take a step towards that.
For sure, getting that message out. I noticed there when you talked about content topics, you didn't say the driver should be kind of passion, the latest trend. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, passion's a tricky one. I mean, I think that you can if you're passionate about something, then yeah, you should definitely talk about it. Trends? I don't know. They're easy to when they come up, you need to take advantage of them, but don't rely on them, you know? Like, that's the real thing, like and figure out if it's right for you with a trend, like, does this feel like it's a fit to me? Like, do I agree with this trend? And then I think that, you could play on those 2 things, but yeah, passion, that's a real tricky one. I would never say, like, ignore your passions and don't talk about your passions, but, I mean, Gary Vee talks about that, right? Like, his whole thing is, you can make more money talking about things that you're passionate about on the internet than you can working a regular job, so there's definitely room for passionate people out there for sure, and driven, motivated people, like, that's actually probably the thing that will separate people long term is how passionate you are about the things that you talk about. How deep do you actually know this subject? Because the more experience, the more knowledge that you have around the subject is going to make you more valuable, especially in a world where you can just, chat GPT something real quick and kind of get a surface level answer. But then when you try to actually talk about it, people are like, wait, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and I guess one of the other benefits of talking about your passion is you're more likely to stick to that long-term content creation roadmap, right?
Definitely. Yeah, because you can just do it. You can just live your life and talk about it, and that's I actually listened to a podcast with because Dan Martell is kind of an interesting case study in, my world, and, he was talking about it. He's like, "I used to try to come in and create content, and I don't wanna just create content, I wanna be the content, you know? So how can and he tried to, like he talked about how he tried to, like, change his mind, when he spoke in tweets. When he spoke in short form content. That's something that I think that you can practice and do more of, and try to figure out how to fit content into your life a little bit better.
Interesting. You touched there on platforms, and you said this before of kind of choose one platform. And I guess when you're picking that platform, should it be, what you think you're more likely to be good at, or is it what you like to consume, the platform of choice when you're watching or reading stuff?
I think if you like it, you're gonna consume on it. So, I think that in my opinion, those are the same thing, and yeah, if you like it, you're gonna know what works and what you see, like, it's just pattern recognition ultimately, you start to see similar things, and you should just focus on that platform that you consume the most content on, most likely, yes. Now it's tricky because once you, like, scale, and, once you grow the team, I don't really think you need to consume on that platform, like, they'll figure out how to take your message and put it on that platform, and, like, for example, like, Cody never watched YouTube, but she's got 1.8 million subscribers on YouTube, so, that's the tricky area right there is I think that when you first start out, you probably focus on the one that you consume the most on, and then when you can hire other people, they'll tell you what you should do on this platform.
Okay. I want to touch now on your catchphrase, which is you believe that creators should be omnipresent. Can you just explain why in 2025 that's a must?
I think creators and businesses in general need to be omnipresent in 2025 because it's easier to search for you in all places than it ever has been. And if you're not in those places and if you're not showing up, then you risk somebody else taking your spot in that place. So, if you're especially with, AI and, SEO changes and all of that different type of stuff, like it's a risk there, right? So it's just basically diversifying your portfolio and saying, I'm going to be the expert on this platform in this subject. And if anybody searches it or if anybody's browsing it or if it gets suggested to you, then you're the one that's gonna show up, not somebody else. I mean, you could show up next to somebody else, but at that point, then you're just kind of fighting for who's better, what quality is better. But yeah, you need to be everywhere if you want to have, I mean, a business, in my opinion. Even if it's just like a regular business, like again, in this case, I work with selfpublishing.com. They're very focused on SEO traffic. But when they go on Instagram or when they go on YouTube and all the other platforms and they're not showing up, then they don't show up in AI results. And AI results, video, I think, in YouTube in particular on Google is way more valuable because if people want to know more, they just click on the video and watch that, it's going to suggest it in that, AI driven content. And then the other piece of this is with ads. I mean, when you start running ads with great organic social content, then the ads theoretically, and I think that I'm not an ads expert, but I listen to them and I kind of understand the space, the ads perform better. So it's just it's kind of like it's almost in, the world today, every company is a media company on some level. And you all need to work with me, So no, I'm just playing.
No, I like.
But yeah, you need to be everywhere.
I agree, and I guess my follow up question on this is for people or business that's maybe not so resource heavy as the 3D team. How can they be omnipresent on a budget?
Pillars and repurposing, like, and AI, honestly, on some level, just showing up, in those places. You need to, in this case, like, it's really like a checklist. It's like, okay, again, I come from the world of fitness. So when I'm training, or I'm wanting to like become a bodybuilder, you have a split. You do legs, you do arms, you do back. I think that you can almost think about like social and content like that. You have, I'm going to do arms today. I'm going to do arms with chest. So that means in this case, I'm going to do short form video and long form video today. And then tomorrow, I'm going to do a little bit of written content. And focus it more so on like your body parts or the different platforms. That's probably the way that I would think about it. You don't have to do all at once, but make sure you're getting a balanced split. And there's, in the fitness world and the bodybuilding, there's like different splits. You could do a full body split one day and then the next day, or you take 2 days off and then you do a full body split. Like there's a bunch of different ways to slice the pie, but that's the best analogy that I have for probably thinking about trying to become omnipresent. And but again, don't even think about that until you've won on one of them. Like win at first, show that people are interested in this, and then start to figure out how you can expand that reach.
Okay, makes sense. I remember when we spoke before as well. You had another catchphrase which was "How then value then who." Can you just explain that for the listener?
Yeah, because everybody, this was a concept that I didn't hit my brain until I started working with Codie, and I'm a slow learner, apparently. But basically, the saying is like who, not how. And I think that that's in my experience, that's not true fully, especially for somebody that is just getting started out. You really need to focus on how at first, like, how does this work? Then you can provide value. Then you can go find your who. The who is not looking for, or the person that, is your who, they're looking for value from you. So you need to create that value. You need to create the competency and a skill set, then go find your who. Like, focus on one skill that if nobody talks to you, nobody, you know, that wants to work with you, like just focus on getting really good at that skill set, whether it's writing, whether it's coding, whether it's, building houses, whatever it is, get really good at that. Then you're going to find the who's. So that's kind of my opinion is like, who, not how is there's literally a book on it. And I think that it's a little bit more complex than that, even though ultimately you are trying to find your who. You, at the beginning stages, really need to focus on becoming super confident or competent, and then being able to provide value, then going to find your who. So it's just a little thing that kind of has always annoyed me because I've been like, I just learned the concept later on in my life. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense if I'm already like at that place, but I don't think that's not a beginner concept. The beginner concept is, like I said, competency, then value, then go find your who.
You mentioned content scorecards before. Could you just talk to that and maybe also explain how creators can set content goals and kind of track the data?
Scorecard is huge. And again, shout out Codie. Like that was a huge unlock for me was a content scorecard. It's so simple, but it's really at the end of the day, like, even when you're managing teams, it makes it a lot easier. You just go, there's two things you look at. You look at the calendar, you point to the calendar, or you point to the scorecard, and then it makes everything a lot easier because there's no questions on what's being done. And you can get into the minutia of, how it's being done, but really at the end of the day, the scorecard is what matters. So basically what we do and what I've kind of implementing across anybody that I work with immediately is there's probably better ways to do it. This is just the, brute force way. But you basically go and create a spreadsheet with week over week tracking for each platform. So on the top column, you'll have all the different weeks. Then on the first column, you'll have all of the different platforms. So in the first column on the A column in the spreadsheet, you have all the different platforms. And underneath those platforms, what you need to do is set the key metrics that you think drive success for that platform. So, ultimately it comes down to followers. That's pretty much the top, KPI for all the platforms. Then underneath that, you can say, how many profile clicks did I get this week? How many likes did I get? How many comments? Like, what was my click through rate? Like, everybody's going to have their own interpretation on what those key metrics are to, growth on that platform. But yeah, you really want to start with that high level follower growth. Then what other metrics can I track? Actual numbers. And well, they could be outcomes as well. Like you could say, we want to get 2 weeks ahead in content posting. Are we 2 weeks ahead right now? Yes or no? So there's like an activity and an outcome. And that's basically what we did every week. And, we had another spreadsheet that was tracking it every day. And then you could go in and see day by day, how many new followers you got across the different platforms. And then there was a Zap. And in this case, it was a VA that was going in and, basically inputting those numbers into Slack on a daily basis so we could see, how much we were growing each day. And that was the content scorecard ultimately.
Okay. And how do you, for some of those more qualitative goals, how do you recommend creators or their teams kind of go about creating those?
Wherever the biggest bottleneck is what you need to focus on. Like, because that's the thing that's stopping you from, theoretically growing more is wherever the biggest bottleneck is. So if the bottleneck is that you know, you don't have much time, then how can we get ahead? If you don't have many ideas, then how can we come up with more ideas? So, you know, that is basically the way that I would look at setting the qualitative goals. And back to the other point, um, you how you set goals is really dependent on in my it can't just be out of thin air, right? So you need to have some sort of framework, some groundwork, like just whether it's week over week goals that you're setting, whether it's year over year goals that you're setting, whether it's quarterly goals. In my opinion, you do it based off of previous data or platform changes. Like for example, like X released videos. Well, when we were going into like 2025 Q1, like goal setting for our platforms and kind of like, where we're projecting our follower growth to be at the end of that quarter, we put a higher growth rate on X because at the time we were starting to work with, the X team internally to create that type of content. So we thought that because video is releasing, there's a new feature that's out, we're probably going to grow faster than we did last quarter or multiple quarters in a row. So yeah, I think that it motivates the team too because they see like, you know, it's a real number. It can be based in a fact. It can be based in historical numbers rather than just being like, yeah, let's hit this crazy like, 1 million in revenue when we're doing 0 in revenue in a year. Like, okay, I think you should start a little bit smaller. Let's start at, let's call it 5,000 in revenue this week. Can we do that? Okay, we hit that. Cool. Let's now try to step it up from there. So that would be my approach.
I want to shift gears now and talk about you. So you obviously kind of had this amazing learning curve. You work with some amazing people. What are you focused on now, and how do you help people with the content?
Well, I think what I'm focused on now is kind of, and I never had done this in the past, is basically frameworking my thoughts a little bit better. And how can I've done this thing in the past now. Now, how can I frame it up in a way that other people can, also use it as well? And that's something that is like a new challenge, a new way of thinking that I never had really done up until this point. But it's what works on the internet. It's what's scalable. So yeah, I think that it's really making more frameworks for the way that I think. And then really there's two approaches and I'm trying to figure this out right now is do I keep going more all in with, creators and helping them grow and kind of getting the behind the scenes tactics, of what's working, or do I start creating my own content, never really been I've created content in the past. It just was really bad. And like from a people watching it perspective, it was fun for me, but wasn't great for a lot of other people. So I'm really trying to figure out what that angle is right now for me. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is I have been with a team. So that's the caveat. There's a team around that has grown from 3 million followers to 8.7 million followers. I'm not saying that it's easy to do, but I've done it and here's how we did it. So, do you want to copy the playbook? That's kind of where I'm focused at now.
And when you work with creators or businesses now, what are you looking at when you're sharing frameworks? Is it ops stuff? Is it team? Yeah, what different kind of variables will you consider and help them with?
It depends on how bad the situation is when you walk into it, really. Like, where are they at in their journey? Do they have ultimately, I think really it comes down to with content in general, it comes down to how much of it can you make and how good is it? Those are the two simple frameworks. So either you can or the two simple like variables in creating content. So if you can create more of it, then you have a higher chance of hitting more quality. So ultimately what, you have to do as a creative director or somebody, head of content that's helping out with this system, with this content machine is be able to create more of it and do it at a higher level. So that means that either you create the production pipeline across the board, like, or just a project management system. Again, once you create that system, it becomes a lot easier because you can assign work out, you can manage different people across different departments and collaborate a little easier. So once you build that out, it becomes easier. Then you focus on the quality, in my opinion. Like while you're still building out, you're focusing on quality, of course, but I think that you need to prove that you can actually hit the quantity and then you focus on the quality. That's my opinion. Other people are going to have a different approach. They're going to say that, quality is the most important thing. But if you can't consistently make that quality, then I don't think you really have a system that can scale. So building the system first, making sure that the pipeline is built and that you have everybody that's informed in that team. They're in the pipeline. They understand the system, and you don't have to communicate with them at that point. It's again, point to the calendar or point to the scoreboard. Those are the two things that we point to, and we don't really need to talk about anything else. Now we can talk. We can figure out the strategy on that specific platform, what we need to do differently, but really we just point to what's been done and what the results are. So freeing up people in those two spaces is kind of where I think I can help out a lot. And it's really just about like finding the the right people to help you get those two things done, really. So whether it's, people that are strategists or whether it's people that are actually, writing or editing or ideating, whatever it is, like, finding the individual atoms in that system that can help input into the overall strategy.
You've mentioned this kind of project management system or pipeline a few times now. Can you just explain at high level what that looks like?
Oh, for some reason, this is like the key here for sure. Basically, the way that it works is you have and you can do it in any of the platforms, right? You could do it in Asana, you could do it in ClickUp, you could do it in Notion, but you really need a centralized, and I hate the word hub, but you need like a control room, a content control room. And in that content control room, you're going to have your different SOPs for all of the different platforms. And again, this is like advanced level stuff probably once you have a system built, but you're going to have all of your SOPs, all of your avatars in there. Like basically, if somebody was new and they walked into this place and they clicked on all of these different places, they could get caught up into how you think, how this operates in one place. Then what you do, and this is the pipeline, it's really just a board view in any of these platforms. And well, it's a board and a calendar view, but you really just have at a high level, you have it for short form content, a board view, you have a long form board view, and you have a written board view. Let's just like call it that. And in those stages, you have idea dump, you have, let's call it packaging, then you have like in some cases, like for a creator, you have like approvals, like, okay, we've come up with an idea, we've packaged it, now does the creator like approve it, and this again, it becomes easy for the creator too, and like, you don't have to have meetings all the time because they can just come in, look, boom, I have my approval, that's it. I like it or I don't, or I'm going to give you some feedback, let's take it back into packaging. So you have approval, then you have, we'll call it like writing or scripting, then you have pre-production, which in the pre-production phase, and again, this is for video, it's a little different for written, but pre-production is all things pre-production. So, what is this idea? What does it require in order to do it? Then the key is there's this like one column, but it's another database or another project, which is called your filming agenda. And, for us, like in the way that I work, it's we every time we go into film, we have an agenda. We know that we're trying to get this many deliverables out of this shoot. And again, that could be for written as well. Like you have this week, we're getting this many posts out this week. So this is the agenda of the things that we're creating. Then you move it into editing, then you move it into packaging, again, like creating thumbnails, titles, any other assets that need to be created with it, and then you can post it. But ultimately, it's just what are the stages along that journey that you need to create? And it's going to be different for each person, each company. And once you set that up, things become a lot easier because again, but now somebody needs to manage that as well, though. So you can't just like build it and then never do anything with it. You need to actively use it. So unless you get everybody's buy-in, then it's not that useful. But yeah, once you get that set up, things become a lot easier because the stages are set. At that point, you're able to make make more of the content.
So that
Yeah.
that's kind of the system. You mentioned before that kind of having the atoms within the system or the right people in the right seats is key as well. It seems like to me this kind of creative director, head of content position is key. Can you just talk to, what the skills that person should have and maybe compensation structure and what that looks like as well?
I feel like this is the hottest like position in media right now, potentially, because everybody that like I know a couple people in the space and they're like they have their agency and they're doing work for somebody, but like ultimately they need to communicate with somebody inside of the company or inside of the organization. So it's a pretty in demand skill set right now across the board, I would say. So there's a lot of opportunity there. But again, with that person, like they need, depending on the stage of, the organization, the creator, the company, they need to be able to contribute on some level. So how can they contribute? Can they write? Can they project manage? Can they manage a team? Can they edit videos? Can they shoot? I think there needs to be a little bit of dual purpose use out of that person at first, especially. And basically, the way that that person gets incentivized is, based off of the company goals ultimately. So either it's revenue or it's follower growth. And you can break those down into, a couple of different categories. Like, for example, mine was on YouTube. If we hit this amount, then you get this amount of money. If we hit this many followers across the board, then you get this. If we hit the New York Times bestseller list, then you get this. There was, it was broken down into individual categories, but it was basically a hit it or don't get it type of system. So yeah, I mean, there's probably a multitude of different ways you could structure something like this. Like, again, depending on the business, depending on how close this person is to the success of the business. Like, if it's really a media oriented company, then they should be highly incentivized to with your success of the company. So, I mean, I think that, this is a position that's easily in the 180 to $250,000, a year type of position. If you are good, if you can manage a team, if you make sure everything gets hit and that you're performing, it's a very valuable position to some people right now, because it's with a creator, they like take themselves out of the process essentially. Like, they still need to be focused on ideas and how we're positioning things, and like, always obsessing over what the new idea is. But if it's in a company, then they're kind of like the head of the, like, they're the face of the media. They're the ones that are the behind the scenes person that's basically using other people to show the content and show these ideas that they're trying to get across. So in that world, I think that they're even more valuable, because they can be replaced, of course, but they're the ones that are really determining how you show up in the world. So yeah.
And there seems like a bit of a supply demand imbalance for this position at the minute, right? As well.
Oh, there is 100%. I mean, I look around and I'm like, I don't really know who would do it and who can do it. I don't really even know I mean, it's hard to find that type of person, because especially somebody that's worked with a bigger creator, now they're out there, of course, but ultimately, like, they have their own wants and needs. They're going to want to maybe work with multiple people. And then if they work with multiple people, then that's just not quite as valuable to the one person. But I think that there's a world in which, like, fractional, creative directors or fractional people are super valuable, because what they can do is set the system up, find the pieces of the puzzle, to make sure that things are getting created, and then monitor it at a high level, and not necessarily have to be in the day to day of things. But in that case, there still needs to be goals that are set for each parties. Like, here's what we're trying to hit. Here's what we're trying to work towards. Like, clear metrics of success for that role, even if it's like a fractional type of position. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards, because I mean, you get the mixture is like it's a really broad mixture. You're like focused on production, you're focused on strategy, you're focused on like cultural relevance. Like, there's all of these different things that you, as a creative director or head of content, that you should be keeping an eye on. And it's some people just aren't interested in all those things. They're interested in one specific thing. And yeah, you almost need this person, I think, is kind of like a creative manager on some level, that uh understands the internet. That's the big key. Has worked with, or has grown their own channels to show that they understand that, like, there's certain dynamics that, you need to take advantage of on the internet.
Slightly
Yeah.
personal question here, but from your perspective and from what you've seen, how much of the week does the talent or the creator spend on this? Because Codie is obviously running a huge business on the back end. So how much focus are you putting on the content?
I think at first a lot, then over time less. Like you basically need a bank, a library, I'll call it, of content. Like you have to build that up somehow. So whether that's you going on podcasts talking about it all, whether that's you writing short form pieces about it, writing a book, whatever it is, but you need content to work with. So at first you should be the one that's creating all the content, and over time you just build up enough pieces of content where either one, the team can just come in and learn that content and like kind of train around it and be able to speak your voice, or two, they just feed you ideas. Basically, they're a water hose and they're just coming in saying, hey, look, I saw this work over here, this format where this woman goes up to a whiteboard and talks about the 6 possible futures of AI. Like, how can we use that same concept but just do it for like business buying or for X subject? And then in that case it's like, okay, because you're the expert in the field, you should theoretically be able to go, okay, I can probably think of 6 different ways we could do this. So it's kind of like I would say at first it's a build up the content bank, the library, and prove that it's valuable, and then kind of give that to the team, let them pull out of the bank, and then they'll deposit into the bank by showing you different ideas as well. So it's like a symbiotic relationship there. But yeah, I would say that it kind of depends on the creator as well. I mean, there's people that just like, you know, can speak for hours and be fine. And then there's others that need some more some more prompting, some more input in order to get that idea that they're thinking of.
I know we've got a few minutes left, so I just want to now think through some of your content philosophies and strategies. The first question that I've got on this is, we talk a lot about kind of avatars. How do you develop an avatar and then, for your content, and then how do you use that to help you guide your content strategy and your process?
I mean, I think it's really just developing any type of offer, really. It's the same type of structure. Like, develop the offer and see if people either one click on it or take you up on it. Like I don't think it has to be that complex. Like actions speak louder than words in this case. So, if you pitch somebody on this idea or you pitch somebody on this piece of content, like, are they interested? Okay, yeah, they seem interested. Well, let me now go create this thing and see how many people click on it. And I think that you really, it's just trying to pick one person to talk to, like I am talking to this one person. This one person has all of their pains, has all of their problems, and there's going to be more people that are like them. And how can I talk to them? And if you get lucky, then, multiple people will click on that, will accept your offer or take you up on that offer. And then you either have a business or you have like product market fit or content market fit. So just talk to one person. I mean, ultimately, like the goal of content and the beauty of content is that it's like just an evergreen piece that's always out there floating in the ether that somebody could just pick up and look at, and you don't really know who it's going to be, and what impact it's going to have on their life. So you know having the one person that you're trying to talk to is a great place to start, because there's going to be more people to pick up on that for sure. Like, what problems are you dealing with? What problems have you went through? I mean, actually, I'm getting around to it finally. The real thing is who were you previously? Talk to your previous self. That's always the thing. Like, you can't, when you're creating content, like, you can't really speak to the rungs of the ladder that are above you, but you can speak to the rungs of the ladder that are below you. So, you know, what did you need to hear is basically how I would position that.
I like that. Okay. My next question is on your take on creator versus curator, and then which one are
Mm,
you?
yeah, I mean, I'm a curator for the most part, I would say. I mean, you have to, if they're both a little synonymous, because you're always like spotting new ideas and trying to figure out how to, crush them together, join them together. I think a creator is like kind of coming up with original thoughts, like new perspectives, new angles, which is very unique. I mean, and very rare, I would say, but especially like today, because there's so much out there. But really, the curator is kind of like taking this idea and taking that idea and taking this other piece of content that you've already put out, have already, seen or had success, and kind of combining the two. And I think that that's really important, like having the creator is that like thing in your brain, or, you as a person that says like, okay, here's what's unique about me, and here's what my unique experiences. And then you also, the second part of it is the curation, and like, now how can I see what's out in the landscape and combine like those things with what's in my head? And I think that there's value to both, and ultimately curation is pretty valuable, I think. And as a creative director and a head of content, if you need to be a great curator.
Can you share the Rare Air story and what it taught you about collaboration and community?
Yeah, this one. So Rare Air was basically a video agency, a marketing agency that my friend Alex Garcia and I started out of a gym called Collective here in Austin. And really, that experience was, we brought in a bunch of other creators. We had a team of 6 to 8 people that were constantly thinking of ideas, constantly creating content, for our clients and even internally. And when I look back on that time, what I realize, and, even working with Codie, it's like who you are around matters so much and will affect you. And, that experience for me working with all those different people was like, I was able to kind of be the most like creative on a skill set basis that I ever have been. I was coming up with new concepts, coming up with new ways of thinking about how this video was going to work, or how we were going to execute this production. And it was just like this echo chamber of, creativity basically. And I think that the whole point in that story is that it really does matter who you surround yourself with. And, back to the original question of, moving from, in this case, I moved from Indiana to Austin, like it's just a different environment. So whatever you're trying to go after, and in this case you're probably trying to create content or trying to become, a creative director, like how can you, that is where the who comes in. Who can I find to surround myself with, that they're going to constantly be reinforcing who I want to become, basically. And that's an important thing to curate. And, even in companies, like the culture, like, you know how is the culture, who is it making you become, what is it making you become? That story of Rare Air was just, again, it was one of the best, like, creative output times I've ever had in my life, and I probably never will have again, honestly. But yeah,
But very interesting. Okay. The
yeah.
next point I want to touch on is what we talked about before, the content Chipotle concept. Can you just break that down for me?
Well, this is just a general thought. Yeah, I sent some notes in before. I was this weekend. I was actually it's called Cabo Bob's here in Austin. It's amazing. Shout out Cabo Bob's. But basically, it's like Chipotle, where they're building your burrito along the way, and there's all these different ingredients out in front of you. And I think content, if you can almost like think of content the same way, that's a great way to start. It's like, okay, do you want a burrito? Do you want a bowl? Is it on this type of burrito? Is it on this type of burrito? Whatever it is, like, do you want steak, rice? Like with content, I think that you can ultimately plot that same thing out. Like, what are all the different level or levers that I can pull? And in this case, what are all the different ingredients I can put into this piece of content that's going to make it satisfy the customer? In this case, they're going to want to come back. And I think that if you can think about your content like that, it's a lot easier to create content. So put all the variables out there, you know, written, video. The next one is potentially location, platform. The next one is like topic. The next one is case study, or, original piece of content, whatever it is in your case. But really trying to break down all the different possibilities that you have, and try to pick the right ingredients for that right person that you're trying to talk to. It was just an interesting concept that kind of came across my mind as I'm standing in line at Cabo Bob's, and I was like, yeah, you can always make an analogy out of something, right? So let's try to do that with Cabo Bob's.
No, I like this, and I think this is true of every kind of business, right? Is it ultimately boils down to this kind of manufacturing line and all these key
Mhm.
parts. And I think, yeah, this is what
Exactly.
content.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the only way to make it repeatable, really, because you can have like that one off success, like, in your one off ingredient list. But in order to make it just like a freaking machine, that kind of just you have the individual parts. This person's picking up the meat. This person's wrapping the burrito. This person's checking you out. Like it's just fractionalizes all of the different parts to get the thing completed. And I think that's another piece. It's like, okay, at the short form person, what are all of the things that are sitting in front of them? Like, do they have the veggies? Do they have, thinking about it that way as a team structure as well, an assembly line, just passing it along the assembly line.
One of the key variables that I always think of is triggers. And can you just talk to now how you think about emotional versus logical versus entertaining content triggers?
There's 3 examples that come to mind for me. The first one is Lex Friedman, and I'll just do this in like a podcast sense. It's very educational based. The type of topics that he talks about are deep subject matter expertise, basically. And the way that he creates his content is going to it, it's should influence the outcome of that, right? Like he doesn't need flashy, intros. If you listen to Lex Friedman podcast, it's literally just, you know, basically a opening question, of course, to hook you in, but it's very monotone, very, no punch-ins, no Stephen Bartlett, so Stephen Bartlett is very emotional based. He really hits on emotions more than anything else, I think. Like he obviously talks about tactics on some level, but he's really trying to, at the core, hit on emotional triggers and how somebody feels about something, like this is what it felt like when my mom kicked me out of the house or, whatever it is. And then the third entertainment bucket, and again, I'm kind of like I kind of hate to say it, but I'm like a kind of a Logan Paul and Jake Paul fan, and they're more entertainment based. They'll come out and they'll say like some random crazy stuff that it'll make you laugh. It'll make you you know connect with them on a just a entertainment level and not on a deep level. They're just like your buddies. You're hanging out with your buddies. Yeah, those are I think like the 3 things that you can. Well, how do you as a creator, like, kind of what is your thing, and play into that and don't and the reason I say that is because don't get too influenced by what you see other people doing, like, really think down to core concepts, like, what is somebody trying to get out of this? Are they trying to be entertained? Are they trying to be educated? Or are they I mean, I guess educated is the same as informed, but are they trying to feel some type of emotions? I think that because a lot of what happens, and we're even guilty of it. You'll see somebody else do something, and you'll go like, "Oh, we should do that." Like Stephen Bartlett does these like crazy podcast intro trailers. Like we should do the same thing. And like obviously everybody has said that, but does that work for you? Is that, like, what you're ultimately trying to get to? Like, what are people coming here for, I go to class to learn. I go to a concert to be entertained or, have a good time. I think you have to kind of take a step back of all the other stuff that's going on and obviously find examples, but be like, make sure the content is coming down to the core fundamentals of what it's actually about.
I've heard it said a few times that the biggest way that you can see if your content has been successful is how much it's been shared. Would you agree with that? And what would you say in terms of how can you build in that share factor if you can?
It's really hard. I mean, it is definitely a huge factor for sure. Like, I think it comes down to relatability on some level. Like, how relatable is this? What is the thing that I can say, oh my God, like I experienced that same thing? Or, oh, like this is I want to be smart. I want to share it with my friends. There's a bunch of different ways you can share things, but really on the internet, like, and I kind of I was thinking about this concept before. It's like, you kind of do work in like the internet, in my opinion, works in like affiliate type of networks where, you have, uh, how many times can you share it with somebody? How many times can you collaborate with somebody? How many different places can you be seen, basically? And, there's referrals on in affiliate networks. And, a share is technically like a referral. Like, hey, world, I just found this cool piece of content. Now I'm going to show you it and refer it to you. And I think that that's definitely something that you need to focus on is like, what is the relatability factor here? And what's going to make somebody go like this was so good, I need to share it. Now that doesn't have to be every piece of content, but like every week, maybe try for one of those. Be like, this is our share piece of content. We know everybody's going to share this. And then you can start to grow across the board. It's interesting too, because like with the affiliate thing, like, on LinkedIn, like there's groups that you can basically join where they'll comment on other posts, in order to show up in somebody else's feed. And it's like, it's literally like the same type of concept as an affiliate network. You're like referring somebody else, you're sending traffic to them, you're engaging. So just I mean, just an interesting thing to think about is like, how can you get in those circles as well? Like, who are you affiliated with on the internet? In this case, I'm affiliated with, Jordan. We're talking about content creation. The way I got here was talking with Caleb Ralston. Like, it's like these types of like things, then perception that you're kind of putting off into the world and trying to be affiliated with them in some way is make sure you're intentional about that because it will come off like, yeah.
I actually I was going to round things off before there, but I think that's a super interesting point. I see a lot of this on Twitter of people just kind of mindlessly commenting underneath threads of people they want to be affiliated with. What do you recommend people do to build out kind of authentic affiliations with other people?
Is there such thing as authenticity on the internet? I don't know. No, I mean, I think that there is, but I think that
Kinda it's not just affiliations with other people, right? It's also ideas. If we look at Codie, what she's affiliated with is, Main Street owning businesses, personal finance, like all these kind of ideas. So it's people and ideas.
mm, oh no, it definitely is. Yeah, people and ideas. Like, what are you known for? But I mean, yeah, being intentional with it. I think it's not just letting it happen by accident. Is pretty important. And that's again something that I didn't realize until like kind of after working with Codie is like, I just saw I keep up with her, and she posted something recently that was like, here's where I started, and then here's where I'm at today, like top 10 on the podcast charts. And it's like that all happened because she was super intentional with it. Like it's basically just chess pieces on a board. Like, how can I move this chess piece here? How can I move it here? Like, I know this person. I now know this person. Like, I'm going to, move my way up the ladder. And I think if you're intentional with it and you know what your end goal is, then you can have authentic connections on some level. But really, it's just, in my opinion, about like that in real life connection at some point. Like, I'm affiliated with you on the internet. Now I'm now I've met you in real life. Like this is an authentic connection. So
Okay. So it's not
yeah.
engagement pods and yeah, commenting for the sake of it under other people's.
I mean, it works, So that's one way. That's a hack. That's a hack, though, in my opinion. Like it's a tactic. It's gonna be there. It's gonna be gone, and it's gonna work for a little while, and then it's not gonna work, and you know you'll figure out other ways to do it. You might have them on your podcast. You might do whatever it is. But I mean, a lot of the times when people go on other people's shows and when they do things like it kind of saddens me because like ultimately like content is always pushing towards a sale and I mean, not everybody's like that, but I'm my perspective on it has been a little tainted because it is always towards a sale. Ultimately, you have to monetize this thing for the most part, and a lot of the consistent creators that do that, like they're always like, sure, they're giving you value, but like you're in their funnel now. You're a part of their ecosystem. Like it's just a big sales network, like the internet, the content creation machine. It's kind of always promotional, and it doesn't have to be like that, but the fact is it is.
And that's almost the world we live in, right? It's capitalist driven, and that's always the end goal.
Exactly. I mean, nobody's creating internet to do like or nobody's creating content on the internet to just like be a good person in the world for the most part. Like they all have some sort of like thing they're wanting to get out of it. And that's fine. I don't knock the hustle. It's just like you have to kind of sparse out what's real and what's not real, and what their intentions are behind it. And that's where I think like trust is the biggest factor right now. Like who do you trust on the internet, And that's what like there's that's intention. Like the creators are now focusing on how can I get people to trust me more? Whether it's live streams, whether it's whatever it is, in-person events, like how can I build the trust factor up?
Before we round things off, the last question I want to end on is, what to you is the creator's dilemma?
This is again one of those like, Chipotle type of analogies that I was trying to think of, but there's Clayton Christensen, he's got a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And I think it was like pretty, impactful on Steve Jobs. And basically the idea is like why successful companies often fail to adapt to, new innovations. And there's like you have like two buckets. You have sustained innovation, which is we can improve the LTV, we can, improve the CAC, we can, improve the product a little bit. And then there's disruptive innovation, which is like we have to rip everything down and start from the scratch. It's a lot more time intensive, it's a lot more investment, it's a lot more risky, but the potential reward of it is a lot higher as well. You're breaking into new markets, you're achieving new heights. And I think that with the creator, like, and this is the problem, like I'm kind of trying to position myself to solve is that they have that same problem. They're the original thinker. This is the creator's dilemma. They're the original thinker. They come up with all the ideas. They do all of it themselves. They post everywhere. Like, they're trying to manage the team. They're trying to create content. They're trying to get sponsorships. Um, and then the other half of that is like, how can you build a team on that? So it's like the dilemma is, do I do it all myself or do I build a team around me to help me do this and make it more sustained? And I think that the way that you can do that is building the scalable system, kind of having, instead of having like just creative freedom to do whatever you want, you have thought processes for how you create content. The other is creating formats that are repeatable, that aren't just consistent, that you can come in and knock out 5 of them in a day and they're going to perform, how you want them to perform. And then really it's the other big difference is the one-off like viral piece of content that you create versus the consistent production of it. I think that that's the dilemmas that a creator faces really. And some people want to be that solo creator and just do it themselves. And, some people want to like dominate the world and be a media company, and that's kind of the person that I would like to talk to is who's trying to build an actual media company here that, can grow beyond and past themselves.
And I know you're doing that now, so maybe that's a good place to touch on as we end is, yeah, what kind of businesses or creators do you want to talk to? How can you kind of directly help them?
I think really the like where I'm most useful for most people is going to be when they've already got content market fit or again product market fit. They've proven their own success and they really now just want to try to scale up either the media in some aspect, whether it's their own content, whether it's the business's content. They're really trying to figure out this new landscape, who's involved in it, what do the pieces look like, how do we make this stuff, how many times do we post a day, like it goes down to all of that different stuff. But really somebody that's, again, they've already proven that the world wants what they have to offer, and I can come in and help them do that with less stress, hopefully, and better production, better output, better quality.
So it's systems and kind of that side of things. We also help with the hiring and the team.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the biggest struggle right now is like again, as like a head of content or a creative director, what does the team look like underneath you? And ultimately, how do you find your replacement? And I think that that's like you have to think about that different type of stuff. What's your ideal output? That's gonna, determine who needs to be on your team and what they look like. But there's a lot of people that are hungry to work in the social world, so you can find the talent. It's just, are you the one attracting them, or do you even know what to look for? And most people, I would say, may not know what to look for potentially. And I think I could help out there.
Okay. And what does working with you look like? Is this kind of a one-time thing where you deep dive into the business, or is it an ongoing kind of consultation?
Here we go. I'm selling, see, content on the internet. It's not about,
Full
it's about
circle.
selling. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, really, my ideal world looks like working with 2 to 4 different people at a deep level and really helping them scale out their, media companies and their media businesses. And eventually just, working with them for, let's call it 9 to 12 months, get it up off the ground, prove that this thing works. And, by that point, you'll be able to do it on your own, and the systems will be in place and the processes will be set up, and you really won't need me anymore, quite honestly.
Okay, sounds good. And for people that are hearing that and they're interested, where can people find you and how should they get in touch?
Yeah, right now I'm kind of like a ninja on the internet. I'm on the platforms, not creating all the different type of content. But if you want to work with me, you can go to www.creators.com. It's going to be Kreaterz. And this was an idea that I had literally, like, 7 years ago. I wanted to basically provide a bunch of different upcoming creators with the tools in order to, like, create content, because to create content, you have to buy a camera, you have to uh get a computer, like you have to have mics, like this stuff is not cheap to do. So this idea of like creators was, I was going to help clients and I was going to build up the team around it and give people the opportunity to create content. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the name. But yeah, you can find me at creators.com. Well,
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Tanner, yeah,
yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and yeah, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it, dude.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.